Finally, it's come time to deploy an early version of this application. Not all of the features that I want here are finished yet, but it's always a good idea to give users the chance to look things over early. And fortunately, deployment to the cloud is only a few clicks away. I am going to deploy to Microsoft Windows Azure websites. If you haven't heard of the websites feature, they're new to Azure and they really make deployment easy and fast. And once you're in Azure, you are in the cloud, which is a very popular place to be these days. And it does mean your site is hosted in someone else's data center, where they are responsible for doing the backups and operating system patches and making sure the electricity is always on. It also means you can scale up very easily by going in and adding more memory or CPU or storage at any time. You can also scale down when you need to. To get started with Azure websites, you'll need an account on the windowsazure.com website. There's a free trial available if you just want to give it a spin. I already have an account, so I'm going to click on Portal. This will allow me to log into the portal, and I'll use a password that is not Fluffy Bunny. But will take me to the portal where I can see all of the services that I have up and running on Windows Azure. All the virtual machines, the websites, the SQL databases, they're all here. What I want to do is create a new website with a database so we can store our employees in their departments. And I'll call this eManager. I want to create a new SQL database for this website, and the region, essentially which data center do I want to select? East United States is fine with me since I do live on the East Coast. On the second page of configuration, I can pick a name for my database. I'll call it eManager DB. I'll just stick with the web edition, the smallest maximum size, the default collation, and I'll use my existing SQL server that I have set up. If you're doing this for the first time, you'll need to create a new database server and create a login with a password. For me, I'll use the existing server, which means I select it in this drop-down, give it my username, and give it a login password. And once I'm finished with that, I can click the checkbox. Windows Azure will go off and start creating this website, start creating the database for me. This only takes a couple of moments, and then I should be able to see that it's running and click on this URL and actually see the website. The next step would be to get my application published into this website and replace this default content. And that's very easy. I can go to this website by clicking on it. That takes me to the dashboard for this website where I can see the CPU time and requests and the amount of data it's using. From here, I can download a publishing profile, which is what I'm going to do. If you're a fan of Git, you can also set up Git publishing, and that means you can deploy your application just by doing a Git push into Azure. But I'll use the publish profile. This will download a file into my downloads directory that will give Visual Studio everything it needs to know to publish this website. And with that on my drive, I can right-click on the web project, select Publish. I want to import that publishing profile that I just downloaded. That has all of the configuration information, what service URL to go to, everything that Visual Studio needs. Go to the next page. I want to deploy a release version of this. I want to use the connection string to the database that I have configured in Azure. And this is a neat little checkbox. I'll tell it, please apply my code first migrations when the application starts. That adds a little additional configuration into the web.config that tells the entity framework when it starts up that it's free to run migrations. And that will create the schema I need for departments and employees, and it will run the seed method to populate it with everything I need. And then, before I go to the next step and finally click Publish and finish this, I want to do one more thing, which hopefully is a step that you will not have to take. But at this point in time, Windows Azure doesn't support .NET 4.5. So what I need to do is target .NET 4.0 in my projects. So I will right-click both projects and set the target framework to 4. Again, Azure support for 4.5 is just around the corner, so you probably won't need to go through this step. As for MVC 4, we'll be just fine because ASP.NET MVC 4 can run on .NET Framework 4 or 4.5. I do need to change one other reference though, and that is my NuGet reference to the Entity Framework, because it turns out there's two versions of the Entity Framework version 5. There's the version that works with .NET 4.5, which I'm going to uninstall, And then there's the version that works with .NET 4.0. So just coming back in here and installing this, NuGet will be smart enough to get the correct version of the entity framework for this version of .NET, install it into the project, and now I'll just do a build to make sure there's no problems. And there is one small problem here, which is that the compare attribute, I now need to have the system.web.mvc namespace in effect for this. It jumped out of that namespace and into the data annotations namespace when we moved to .NET 4.5, but since we just moved back a version, I needed to add that using. So now everything builds, and now I should be able to come into my website, say that I want to publish this with those settings I just saved previously, and we'll just do a publish operation. At this point, Visual Studio will show me in the output everything that's happening to get this pushed up to Azure. It has to copy over all of my scripts, CSS files, images, and assemblies, so it does take a little bit of time the first time you publish. Now the publish operation has finished, and it has succeeded, so I should be able to come back into this website, do a refresh, and see the website running on Azure. It's at emanager.azurewebsites.net. My code first migrations ran and populated the database with some departments, and I should even be able to log in with my username and password at this point and create some employees for this department, because it did run on a fresh new database that has no employees inside of it.